I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 32, a financial advisor who just walked away from $85 million. When I announced it at our family gathering, my father's mocking laughter echoed through our mansion. Throwing away your birthright, he sneered, for what my grandfather's tech empire had built our dynasty, but money this poisoned wasn't worth keeping. Dad's laughter died instantly when he read my letter. His face drained of color as decades of secrets unraveled before him. Some inheritances come with invisible chains. I chose freedom over wealth built on betrayal. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had to make a difficult choice between family and doing what's right. Subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Now let me take you back to where it all began, when I still believed in the Golden Mitchell family name. The Mitchells weren't always Boston royalty. My grandfather Richard started with nothing but ambition and a garage workshop in 1968. By the time I was born in the early 1992s, Mitchell Technologies had revolutionized military communication systems and made our family worth 9 figures. Our colonial mansion in Beacon Hill hosted senators and CEOs, our donations named hospital wings, and our Christmas parties made the society pages. That was the public image carefully crafted by my father, William Mitchell. A tall, imposing man with prematurely silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he took over as CEO when Grandpa Richard semi-retired. Dad expanded into commercial tech, tripling company value, while maintaining our sterling reputation. Appearance is reality, he'd remind us before every public outing. The Mitchell name opens doors that talent alone cannot. What those society photographers never captured was Mother drowning herself in gin martinis by 3 in the afternoon. Victoria Mitchell, former debutante and Boston College beauty, had perfected the art of functioning alcoholism. She'd attend charity galas in designer gowns, charm everyone present, then collapse in tears once the town car door closed. I'd help her to bed while Dad locked himself in his study. "Don't worry about your mother," he'd say dismissively. "Focus on maintaining our standards." Those standards applied differently to my older brother James. While I fought for every scrap of paternal approval, James received it automatically. Handsome, athletic, and charismatic, he graduated from Harvard Business School and joined Mitchell Technologies as Dad's heir apparent. His mistakes were learning experiences. Mine were disappointments. My only real ally was my cousin Rebecca. Her father, Dad's younger brother, had died in a boating accident when we were children, and she spent summers with us. Rebecca was everything. I wasn't confident, carefree, and able to charm Dad without trying. Yet, somehow, we bonded. She'd sneak into my room at night and we'd share secrets and dreams. "You're the smart one, Cass," she'd whisper. "James may be the favorite, but you've got the real Mitchell talent." That talent helped me forge my own path. Despite Dad's insistence that I join the family business, I pursued financial analysis at Princeton, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a prestigious position at Morgan Stanley. By 30, I'd built a reputation as a razor-sharp investment advisor and started my own boutique firm specializing in ethical investing. The family manipulations began subtly. Dad withholding connections unless I consulted on Mitchell Technologies projects. Mother suggesting prestigious clients might not trust a financial advisor who spurned her own family's legacy. James offering backhanded compliments about my cute little company at family gatherings. I maintained my independence, visiting for major holidays and the occasional Sunday dinner-keeping conversations, pleasant but superficial. I thought I'd established boundaries they wouldn't cross. Then Grandpa Richard died unexpectedly from a stroke at 82. The entire Boston business community attended his funeral. Governor and senators delivered eulogies. Dad managed the perfect performance as the grieving son taking up his father's mantle. 2 weeks later, the family gathered in our attorney, Theodore Blackwell's mahogany-paneled office for the reading of the will. Grandpa had always shown me special attention discussing economic theories and market trends while James and Dad talked sports and politics. Still, I expected the bulk of his estate to go to Dad and James. When Theodore announced I would inherit $85 million in Mitchell Technologies, stock nearly 20% of Grandpa's holdings, and equal to James's share, the room fell silent. Dad's face reddened. Mother gasped. James's knuckles whitened around his Mont Blanc pen. Additionally, Theodore continued adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Cassandra will receive a seat on the board of directors effective immediately. As Theodore read the letter Grandpa had written me about his faith in my financial acumen and ethical compass, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and foreboding. Dad's tight smile didn't reach his eyes. "Congratulations, darling," he said, kissing my cheek coldly. "Your grandfather always did have a soft spot for you. We'll discuss how to integrate you into operations next week." I had no idea that Grandpa's gift would expose the rot beneath our family's golden facade, or that the inheritance would prove far more dangerous than valuable. 6 months after inheriting my stake in Mitchell Technologies, my own investment firm, Mitchell Ethical Capital, was gaining serious momentum. I'd secured contracts with 3 sustainable energy startups and a women's microfinance initiative in developing countries. Business journals were featuring my approach of prioritizing both financial returns and positive social impact. Each success felt like validation of my choice to build something separate from the family empire. I maintained my board seat at Mitchell Technologies, attending quarterly meetings and reviewing financial reports, but focused primarily on my own venture. James appeared supportive, occasionally stopping by my downtown office with coffee and questions about my latest projects. As Dad's right-hand man and chief operating officer, he seemed to have accepted my independent role in the family businesses. "We should collaborate more," he suggested during one visit, leaning against my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. "Your ethical investment strategies could help modernize some of our divisions." I was cautiously optimistic about this olive branch. Perhaps Grandpa's decision had helped James see me as a colleague, rather than competition. That illusion shattered on a rainy Tuesday when Ariana Lopez, CEO of GreenGrid Solutions, called in a panic. "Cassandra, someone claiming to represent you just contacted our CFO, saying you're withdrawing your investment due to concerns about our quarterly projections." My stomach dropped. "I never authorized that." "Who contacted you exactly?" "A Mitchell Technologies executive. Said you'd asked him to handle the matter discreetly since you were traveling." I was very much in Boston at my desk and had never expressed concerns about GreenGrid's solid performance. After reassuring Ariana, I spent the afternoon making similar calls to other clients who'd received mysterious communications, questioning my commitment or suggesting I'd found concerning irregularities in their financials. The pattern was clear: someone was systematically undermining my business relationships. Late that evening, I went to Mitchell Technologies headquarters to access security records, showing who had used company resources to contact my clients. The building was nearly empty, but light spilled from under James's office door. I intended to confront him directly, but paused when I heard his voice through the partially open door. "Dad, relax. She'll never trace it back to us," James was saying. "By the time she salvages these relationships, she'll be grateful for any lifeline we throw her." "She's more capable than you give her credit for," Dad replied. "Richard's little protégé has her grandfather's stubbornness. And like Grandpa, she has blind spots. She still believes success comes from merit rather than connections and power. Once her company falters, we'll offer to absorb it into our ESG division. She gets a soft landing, we get her client base and her $85 million in shares back under control. Just make sure nothing leads back to Mitchell Technologies," Dad warned. Your sister may be idealistic, but she's not stupid. I stepped away, shock and betrayal warring with a strange sense of clarity. The brother who'd hugged me at Grandpa's funeral, who'd congratulated me on recent successes, had been systematically destroying my professional reputation. The next day, I confronted James in his office, showing him printouts of the communications traced back to Mitchell Technologies' servers. Instead of denying it, he laughed. "Took you long enough to figure it out, Cass." "Why would you do this?" I demanded. "We're family." "Exactly. Family businesses stay in the family, not split into competing ventures that dilute the Mitchell brand." His handsome face hardened. "You were never supposed to strike out on your own. You were never supposed to get equal inheritance. Dad spent 30 years protecting what Grandpa built, and you think you can just take your share and walk away. It was my inheritance to use as I saw fit." "Nothing is just yours in this family," James snapped. "Everything serves the Mitchell legacy. Your little ethical investment shop makes us look old-fashioned and undermines our defense contracts. Did you think we'd just let that continue?" I brought the evidence to Dad, foolishly, hoping he'd be angry at James's tactics. Instead, he sighed, as if I were a child complaining about a playground dispute. "Your brother's methods were perhaps overzealous," he admitted, "but his concerns are valid. You've created a conflict of interest, Cassandra. Either fold your company into our corporate structure or divest your Mitchell Technologies shares. Grandpa wanted me to have independence. Your grandfather made an emotional decision that undermines what he spent his life building," Dad said coldly. "I'm giving you the chance to correct it gracefully." I left without answering, my world turning upside down. Rebecca helped me make emergency calls to clients vouching for my integrity and using her own society connections to repair some of the damage. Still, I lost a major client and watched my firm's reputation take a significant hit. As I worked late rebuilding what James had nearly destroyed, I received a strange email from Herbert Kleinman, the Mitchell Technologies accountant who had worked with Grandpa for decades. The message contained only one cryptic line: "Check the numbers in the Singapore subsidiary accounts." Not all foundations are built on solid ground. That was the moment I began to suspect the Mitchell fortune might be built on something far worse than family dysfunction. Herbert Kleinman's cryptic message haunted me for days. As a financial advisor, I knew check the numbers rarely suggested good news. Singapore had some of the strictest banking secrecy laws in the world, a perfect jurisdiction if you wanted to hide questionable transactions. My board member credentials gave me access to Mitchell Technologies' financial systems, though I'd previously only reviewed the quarterly summaries prepared for directors. Now I began examining raw data, starting with international subsidiaries. The surface numbers looked impeccable. Mitchell Technologies' reputation for financial stability was well-founded. But applying forensic accounting techniques revealed subtle discrepancies, inventory valuations that didn't match market rates, consulting fees to shell companies, and tax deductions that stretched legal limits. I needed more information than I could access remotely. 3 weeks after James's sabotage attempt, I waited until the headquarters emptied after 9 p.m. Then used my security credentials to enter the executive floor. The risk was significant if caught. I'd be accused of corporate espionage against my own family, but I needed to know what Grandpa Richard and Dad had been hiding. Herbert Kleinman's office was meticulously organized with color-coded files dating back decades. I focused on the Singapore operations, photographing documents and downloading files onto an encrypted drive. Around midnight, a security guard's footsteps sent me hiding behind a filing cabinet, heart pounding as he passed by the door. Back in my apartment, I spent the weekend analyzing what I'd found. The pattern emerged clearly. Grandpa Richard had established a sophisticated tax evasion system in the 1,980 seconds, hiding millions in offshore accounts while fabricating business expenses. What began as aggressive tax avoidance crossed into outright fraud when the company began government contracting. The military communications systems that built our fortune had been systematically overbilled to the Pentagon, with the difference funneled through Singapore. Even more damning, Dad hadn't just inherited the system, he'd expanded it. Under William Mitchell, the company created a network of shell corporations that concealed both tax evasion and government contract fraud worth hundreds of millions. I felt physically ill. The Mitchell fortune my inheritance included was built on defrauding American taxpayers. If exposed, the company would face crippling penalties, and family members could face criminal charges. Needing to understand if this was confined to Dad or more widespread, I arranged a private lunch with Mother at her favorite restaurant. Victoria Mitchell appeared sober, dressed impeccably in Chanel, her blonde hair in a perfect French twist. "You've been distant since the inheritance, darling," she said, sipping sparkling water. "Your father says you've been difficult about integrating your little company." I chose my words carefully. "I've been reviewing our international operations. The accounting seems creative." Mother's hand trembled slightly. "Business finances aren't really my area." "I think they are, Mother. Your signature is on the Singapore Foundation documents as a trustee." Her carefully maintained facade cracked. "Not here, Cassandra." She glanced around the restaurant. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." Back at her penthouse, Mother poured herself 3 fingers of gin, no tonic. "Of course I knew," she said, dropping all pretense. "Why do you think I drink? Your father and grandfather built an empire on quicksand. I signed whatever documents they put in front of me. It's fraud, Mother. Criminal fraud." "It's business," she snapped. "Every fortune has skeletons. The Kennedys, the Rockefellers, you think their hands are clean. Your grandfather did what was necessary to succeed." "Did Grandpa Richard know you knew?" Mother laughed bitterly. "Richard appreciated that I understood what family loyalty meant. Unlike you, apparently." Her words chilled me. "What does that mean?" Mother's expression changed, her vulnerability replaced by something harder. "It means you need to stop digging, Cassandra. Your father knows you've been accessing restricted files. He's been patient because you're family, but patience has limits." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. There are 2 paths forward. Either you embrace your role in this family with all its complications, or you'll find yourself very alone in this world." She finished her drink. James was clumsy with his approach, but his message was correct. In or out, Cassandra. No middle ground. I left Mother's penthouse shaken, no longer certain who I could trust. That uncertainty deepened when I found a note under my windshield wiper in the parking garage. "Stop digging if you know what's good for you." I needed an ally, someone with no financial stake in Mitchell Technologies. Rebecca seemed the obvious choice. We met at a quiet cafe on Newbury Street, away from family haunts. "You look terrible, Cass," she said, genuine concern in her eyes. "Is this still about James sabotaging your clients?" I explained everything: Kleinman's message, the financial discrepancies, the Singapore account's Mother's warning. Rebecca listened intently, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "This is enormous," she finally said. "If this got out, it would destroy the company. Everyone's investments, pensions, jobs, all gone. If it's fraud, it should be exposed," I insisted. "But is exposing it your responsibility, especially when it means destroying your own family?" Rebecca placed her hand over mine. "Maybe there's another way. You could pressure your dad to clean up operations going forward without exposing past activities. You're suggesting I become complicit. I'm suggesting you be strategic. Think about all the innocent employees who would suffer. Think about your mother, who clearly feels trapped in this situation." Rebecca's concern seemed genuine, but something felt off about her focus on protecting the family rather than addressing the criminal activity. Still, I had few allies and couldn't afford to alienate her. "I need time to consider my options," I said. Of course, Rebecca squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Just be careful, Cass. And maybe consider the possibility that there are things about business you don't fully understand yet." Her words echoed in my mind as I drove home, wondering if I was being naive or if my family's moral compass had been corrupted by decades of rationalized criminality. The deeper I dug, the more isolated I felt. 3 days after meeting with Rebecca, I received a text from Dad Family Emergency Meeting, home. 7 p.m. Non-negotiable. The Mitchell estate was fully illuminated when I arrived, luxury cars filling the circular driveway. Not just immediate family then. Inside, hushed conversations stopped as I entered the main salon, where about 20 relatives had gathered, including cousins and in-laws I rarely saw outside of major holidays. Dad stood by the fireplace posture, rigid, James at his right hand. Mother sat on the sofa, unusually sober and tense. Theodore Blackwell, our family attorney, stood near the windows, his expression grave. Cassandra, Dad's voice cut through the silence. "Thank you for joining us." The formality confirmed this wasn't a normal family gathering. I took the only empty seat, noting Rebecca's absence. "I've called this meeting," Dad continued, "because we face an internal threat to our family legacy. For 3 generations, Mitchells have prioritized collective success over individual gain. Recent actions suggest one of us has forgotten that principle." All eyes turned to me. For those unaware, Cassandra has been conducting unauthorized investigations into confidential company finances. She's accessed restricted files, removed documents from premises, and implied criminal wrongdoing to multiple parties, including her mother. Murmurs rippled through the room. "That's a creative interpretation," I said evenly. "I've been exercising my rights as a board member to understand company operations." James stepped forward. "That's not all, unfortunately." He distributed folders to everyone present. "These are copies of emails Cassandra sent to 3 competitors exploring a potential sale of her Mitchell Technologies shares, along with proprietary information about our government contracts division." I stood up, stunned. "That's an absolute lie. I never sent those emails." "The IP address and authentication records say otherwise," James replied smoothly. "We've had cybersecurity experts verify their authenticity." I grabbed one of the folders. The emails were sophisticated forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless, containing phrases I would never use and references to meetings that never occurred. "This is fabricated evidence," I declared, looking around the room. Most relatives avoided my gaze, already convinced by the official family narrative. Mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Cassandra, darling, we're worried about you. The pressure of your inheritance, running your own company, perhaps it's been too much." "I'm perfectly fine. What's happening here is obvious character assassination." Dad sighed dramatically. "Theodore, please explain the legal situation." The attorney cleared his throat. "Miss Mitchell, these actions potentially violate your fiduciary duty to Mitchell Technologies, your non-disclosure agreement, and possibly federal securities laws. The board would be within its rights to pursue legal remedies, including a forced sale of your shares." The trap was elegant and comprehensive. They'd manufactured evidence of corporate espionage to justify stripping me of Grandpa's inheritance, while discrediting any accusations I might make about financial improprieties. Elderly Uncle Philip, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, surprised everyone by raising his hand. "William, this seems extreme. Cassandra has always been the sensible one. Surely there's been some misunderstanding." "I wish that were the case," Philip, Dad replied. "But the evidence is unfortunately clear. Cassandra has been working to undermine the company, possibly due to resentment over James's leadership position. That's absurd, I protested. Uncle Philip, they're doing this because I've discovered systematic tax evasion and contract fraud. The Singapore accounts— Enough, Dad thundered. This paranoid fantasy about financial impropriety is exactly what concerns us. Theodore has reviewed our international operations thoroughly. Everything is compliant with applicable laws. Theodore nodded solemnly. I can personally attest to the company's financial integrity. Of course he could. Theodore had helped set up the offshore structures. The meeting continued with various relatives expressing concern for my mental well-being and disappointment in my betrayal of family values. James presented additional evidence of my supposed corporate espionage, each document more outrageously fabricated than the last. Throughout this character assassination, I noticed Henry Westfield, Grandpa Richard's oldest friend and business partner, watching silently from the corner. Though retired for years, Henry still held honorary board status. His eyes met mine briefly, his expression unreadable. After nearly 2 hours of this orchestrated takedown, Dad delivered his ultimatum. Cassandra, we're prepared to handle this privately, as family matters should be handled. There will be no legal consequences if you agree to 3 conditions. First, sell your Mitchell Technologies shares back to the company at a fair market valuation. Second, cease all investigations into company finances. Third, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering all aspects of family and business operations. And if I refuse, then the board will have no choice but to pursue all available legal remedies for your corporate espionage and violations of fiduciary duty, Theodore answered. Given the evidence, the outcomes would be severe. The room fell silent, everyone waiting for my response. The family had closed ranks, completely choosing wealth preservation over truth or justice. Even relatives I'd considered allies sat in complicit silence. I need time to consider my options, I finally said. You have 48 hours, Dad replied. After that, we proceed with legal action. I left the estate without speaking to anyone else, tears of frustration and betrayal blurring my vision as I drove away. The family I'd been born into had become my enemies, willing to destroy my reputation and future rather than face the truth about their wealth. Back at my apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was facing. My phone rang around midnight, an unknown number. Cassandra Mitchell, an elderly voice I recognized as Henry Westfield's. Mr. Westfield, how did you get this number? Richard gave it to me years ago. Said if anything ever happened to him, I should look out for you. He spoke quietly, almost whispering. I can't talk long, they'll be watching you now. Meet me tomorrow at the Gardner Museum Italian Courtyard, 10 a.m. Come alone, don't tell anyone. I have something you need to see. The call ended before I could respond, offering a tiny flicker of hope in the darkest moment of my life. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was nearly empty when I arrived the next morning. I found Henry Westfield seated on a bench in the Italian courtyard, feeding crumbs to sparrows, looking every bit the retired businessman enjoying a peaceful morning. Don't sit too close, he murmured as I approached. And don't look directly at me. We're probably being watched. I perched on the far end of his bench, pretending to admire the architecture. Your grandfather knew this day might come, Henry said, still watching the birds. William was always too hungry for growth, too dismissive of ethical guardrails. Richard hoped you might be the counterbalance. Why didn't Grandpa just fix the problems himself? Henry sighed. By the time he realized how deep William had taken things, he was already ill. Untangling it would have meant admitting his own initial shortcuts. He thought giving you power within the company might lead to gradual reform. Instead, I'm being framed for corporate espionage. Your father fights dirty when threatened. Always has. Henry slipped a key into my museum guide. Storage Unit 447 Westfield Security Complex, downtown. Password is Richard's birthday backward. Everything you need is their original incorporation documents, historical banking records, Richard's private notes about the evolution of the offshore systems. Enough to verify your suspicions, but also to understand the full context. Why are you helping me? You could be implicated too. I'm 87 Cassandra. Cancer will take me within months. Richard was my dearest friend, and I've watched his son corrupt his legacy. I have nothing to lose and old promises to keep. We parted ways without further conversation. That afternoon, I retrieved a heavy box of documents from the storage facility. Hours of review confirmed everything I'd suspected, and worse. Grandpa had indeed started with aggressive but largely legal tax minimization, but Dad had expanded into outright fraud, falsifying government contract details, and creating elaborate fictions to hide money. Most disturbing was a folder labeled Insurance Policies Evidence Dad had compiled against other wealthy Boston families, presumably to ensure mutual destruction if anyone threatened exposure. I needed emotional support and strategic advice. Rebecca was my only real ally, so I called her. "Oh my God, Cass, I've been trying to reach you," she answered. "I just heard about yesterday's meeting." "Are you okay?" "Barely. Can you come over? I need to show you something." "I'll bring dinner and wine." "Hang tight." Rebecca arrived an hour later with Thai food and a sympathetic ear. I explained everything: Henry's documents, the extent of the fraud, Dad's ultimatum. "This is even worse than you thought," she said, examining a particularly damning bank transfer record. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm considering becoming a whistleblower," I admitted. "The SEC has a program that offers some protection." Rebecca looked alarmed. "That's incredibly risky, Cass. They would destroy you publicly. And whistleblowers often end up blacklisted in their industries." "What's the alternative?" "Let them continue defrauding the government. Let them strip me of my inheritance, using fabricated evidence." "Maybe there's a middle path," Rebecca suggested. "Use this evidence as leverage for a better settlement. Negotiate exit terms that protect your reputation and financial future." We spent hours discussing options, Rebecca playing devil's advocate to every potential approach. By midnight, we developed a plan to compile the most compelling evidence for the Securities and Exchange Commission while preparing for the inevitable family counterattack. Over the next 3 days, I worked relentlessly scanning documents, preparing a comprehensive timeline, and drafting my official whistleblower statement. Rebecca helped organize the material and connected me with a former classmate who specialized in whistleblower protection. "I think we're ready," I told Rebecca on the 4th night, looking at our completed SEC package. "I'm filing this tomorrow morning." She hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Cass. You're braver than any of us." She took the external hard drive containing backup copies of all evidence. "I'll keep this safe. If anything happens, I have your back." The weight on my shoulders lightened slightly. At least I wasn't completely alone. I slept fitfully that night, waking to every sound in my apartment building. Around 4 a.m., I finally fell into deep sleep, exhausted from weeks of stress and late nights. When my alarm blared at 7 a.m., I stumbled to the kitchen for coffee before showering and dressing carefully for my appointment with the SEC representative. I gathered my documentation only to discover my briefcase empty. The file folders containing original documents were missing. Frantic, I searched the entire apartment. Not only were the physical documents gone, but my laptop showed signs of forced access. The encrypted files were corrupted, and the external backup drive was missing from its hiding place in the hollowed-out book on my shelf. I called Rebecca, immediately, panic rising. No answer. I tried again and again as I tore through my apartment looking for any remaining evidence. Nothing. With growing dread, I checked my building security camera footage using the tenant portal on my phone. At 3:17 a.m., the recording showed Rebecca entering with a key I'd given her months ago. She wasn't alone. 2 men in dark clothing accompanied her. They headed directly to my apartment and emerged 20 minutes later carrying my briefcase and laptop bag. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Rebecca, my closest ally and confidant, had orchestrated the theft of my evidence. While I'd been planning to become a whistleblower, she'd been reporting everything back to the family. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a text message from Dad. Now, you understand what loyalty means. 48 hours have passed. Our attorney will be in touch with paperwork. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the completeness of my defeat. Every avenue of resistance had been cut off. My evidence was gone, my supposed ally revealed as a spy, and my family stood united against me with fabricated evidence of my wrongdoing. In that moment, I truly understood how alone I was in this fight against the Mitchell family machine. The week after Rebecca's betrayal was the darkest of my life. I stopped answering calls, barely ate, and spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation looking for signs I'd missed. Sleep came only with exhaustion, bringing nightmares of drowning in black water while my family watched from a yacht. When my doorbell rang on the 5th day, I almost didn't answer. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery man with flowers. Probably another veiled threat disguised as family concern. I opened the door to find not flowers but Henry Westfield's nurse, Lucia. "Mr. Westfield sent me," she whispered. "He's concerned about you. Tell him it's over. They won. They took everything." "Not everything." She handed me a small flash drive. "Mr. Westfield made copies. He said to tell you. Richard's granddaughter doesn't give up that easily." Hope flickered briefly, then died. "It doesn't matter anymore. I can't fight them alone. That's why I'm also supposed to give you this." She handed me a business card for Catherine Westfield, staff reporter, Boston Investigative Journal. "Henry's daughter." Lucia nodded. "She's expecting your call. Today." After she left, I stared at the flash drive and card for hours before finding the courage to call. "Miss Mitchell." Catherine answered immediately. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't call." "I'm not sure why I did," I admitted. "What did your father tell you?" "Enough to know we need to meet in person, not at your apartment." "Are you being followed?" The question hadn't even occurred to me. "I don't know." "Assume you are. Can you make it to Massachusetts General Hospital?" My father was admitted yesterday. Visiting him provides a believable cover. The hospital, bustling with activity, provided anonymous safety. Henry Westfield lay in a private room, oxygen tubes in his nostrils, skin papery and yellowed. "Cassandra." His voice was weaker than at the museum. "Forgive the dramatics. Dying has some advantages people expect hospital visits." Catherine Westfield stood by the window, tall, angular, with her father's penetrating gaze. Approximately 40, she wore no makeup and kept her gray-streaked hair in a simple ponytail. "I've been investigating the Mitchells for 3 years," she said without preamble. "Your family's political contributions led me to their government contracts, which led to inconsistencies in Pentagon billing records. You know about the fraud." I suspected but couldn't prove it. Dad filled in some gaps, but we needed internal documentation, which I had until my cousin orchestrated a theft of everything. Henry coughed weakly. "Not everything. The copies I gave you are encrypted with military-grade protection. Plus, I kept the originals of certain key documents from Richard's files." Catherine pulled a chair closer to her father's bed. "You look terrible, Miss Mitchell. When did you last eat properly?" The simple human concern broke something inside me. To my mortification, I began sobbing, deep-racking cries I couldn't control. Catherine awkwardly patted my shoulder. while Henry watched with sad eyes. They took everything I managed between sobs. My evidence, my company, my reputation. The family's threatening legal action based on fabricated emails. My bank accounts are frozen pending investigation of financial irregularities. I was fired yesterday. My own mother called to say I'm no longer welcome at family gatherings. Classic isolation tactics, Catherine nodded. They're cutting off all support systems to force your compliance. It's working. I have nothing left to fight with. That's not true, Henry said firmly. You have the truth. You have your grandfather's moral courage. And now you have us. Catherine explained she had sources inside the Pentagon Procurement Division willing to verify billing discrepancies if provided with specific contract numbers and dates. Her newspaper had successfully protected whistleblowers in previous investigations. Together with Henry's copies and remaining documents, we could still build a case. As they outlined a potential path forward, I felt something I'd thought permanently extinguished hope. Our planning was interrupted when William Mitchell himself appeared in the doorway. Henry, he nodded coldly. Interesting choice of company you're keeping. Dad was immaculately dressed as always, but I noticed new lines around his eyes, a tightness in his expression. William Henry replied calmly, just reminiscing about the old days with Richard's granddaughter. Have you met my daughter, Catherine? She's a journalist. Dad's eyes narrowed at Catherine Westfield, the muckraker from the Investigative Journal. Your hit piece on Senator Harrison was quite something. It won a Pulitzer, Catherine replied pleasantly. Facts tend to speak for themselves. The tension in the room was suffocating. Dad turned his attention to me. The family has made a decision, Cassandra. Given your recent difficulties, we're contesting Richard's will on grounds of your mental instability. Theodore has prepared the paperwork. I came out of courtesy to let you know before it becomes public. Mental instability, I echoed, incredulous, despite everything. Your paranoid accusations, erratic behavior, inability to maintain employment, the pattern is clear and concerning. The board feels Richard would never have entrusted company shares to someone in your condition. It was an elegant strategy. Any defense I mounted would be dismissed as further evidence of instability. Even my new alliance with the Westfields could be framed as proof of paranoia. Catherine stood phone in hand. Mr. Mitchell, just to clarify, are you formally alleging that Miss Mitchell is mentally unfit to manage her affairs? For the record, Dad's expression hardened. I'm having a private conversation with my daughter about family concerns. Of course. Just unusual to discuss such sensitive matters in front of witnesses, including a journalist. Dad looked from Catherine to Henry, clearly recalculating his approach. We only want what's best for Cassandra. Perhaps we can discuss options that don't involve litigation. I think we're past that, I said, finding unexpected strength in Catherine's presence. Any further communication should go through my legal representation. Don't be foolish, Cassandra. You can't afford quality legal counsel now that your assets are frozen. Catherine smiled thinly. Interesting you should know the details of her financial situation. Banking privacy laws being what they are. Dad retreated shortly after, clearly unsettled by the witnesses to his intimidation tactics. After he left, Catherine helped me secure temporary housing in a friend's vacant apartment and connected me with a lawyer specializing in whistleblower cases. Henry's remaining strength was fading, but he provided additional context about Grandpa Richard's original business practices and how William had corrupted them. That evening, as we prepared to leave the hospital, Catherine received an urgent call from her editor. She listened silently, face growing darker. Someone just pitched a story about you to 3 major Boston publications, she told me after hanging up. Anonymous source claims, you're under federal investigation for attempting to sell classified defense information from Mitchell Technologies to foreign interests. The family's counterattack had begun more vicious than I'd imagined possible. My name would be publicly dragged through the mud associated with treason and espionage. Even if later disproven, the allegations would permanently damage my reputation and credibility. They're not just trying to take your inheritance, Catherine realized. They're salting the earth, making sure you'll never be believed about the fraud, never work in finance again, never rebuild. Despite the devastating news, something had fundamentally changed inside me. The family I'd spent my life seeking approval from had shown their true nature. There was nothing left to lose, no reason for half measures. Then we hit back harder, I said, surprising myself with my resolve. They've made this nuclear. Let's give them what they want. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity of purpose. The Mitchell family had declared total war, unaware they'd freed me from any remaining familial obligation or restraint. Our new headquarters became Catherine's compact apartment in Cambridge walls, soon covered with timeline charts, financial diagrams, and photos of key Mitchell Technologies executives. Catherine worked her journalistic contacts while I reconstructed the evidence trail using Henry's remaining documents and my own financial expertise. 2 weeks after the hospital confrontation, we expanded our alliance by bringing in Marcus Garcia, a forensic accountant with SEC experience who now ran an ethical business consultancy. The Singapore structure is elegant but ultimately traceable, Marcus observed, studying our reconstructed flowcharts. Classic layered approach, legitimate transactions mixed with fraudulent ones, using the complexity to hide the irregularities. Can we prove it without the original documents, I asked. Marcus nodded. We don't need every document. We just need enough verifiable evidence to trigger a formal investigation. Once that happens, subpoenas and search warrants will uncover what we're missing. Catherine's connections at the Pentagon provided redacted procurement records that, when compared with public Mitchell Technologies, filings showed clear discrepancies in reported contract values. Henry contributed his correspondence with Grandpa Richard, including oblique references to aggressive structures that contextualizing the company's evolution. My role was synthesizing everything into a comprehensive narrative and identifying former employees who might corroborate key details. My years in the family business meant I knew who had been marginalized or pushed out for asking too many questions. As we built our case, the Mitchell family escalated their campaign against me. The espionage allegations appeared in the Boston Business Journal, attributed to sources familiar with the investigation. My college classmates received calls from concerned individuals sharing rumors about my supposed mental breakdown. Former clients were told I was under investigation for securities fraud. They're getting desperate, Catherine noted, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Our breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Late one evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. Cassandra Mitchell. A man's voice unfamiliar. Who's asking? Someone who processed a lot of paperwork for your father. Invoices that didn't match deliverables. Contracts with strange appendices. The kind of things that keep an honest accountant awake at night. The caller was Edward Parnell, former senior accountant at Mitchell Technologies, who had been abruptly retired 5 years earlier with a generous severance and ironclad NDA. He'd kept backup documentation as personal insurance and was finally ready to talk, motivated by seeing the public attacks against me. Your grandfather treated people with respect, Edward explained when we met. Your father treats them like disposable tools. I've watched what they're doing to you. Same playbook they used on me and others who asked questions. With Edward's cooperation, our case strengthened dramatically. He provided dates, contract numbers, and names of others who might corroborate if approached carefully. Catherine began conducting discreet interviews, accumulating sworn statements from former employees willing to testify about irregular financial practices. As our evidence mounted, we received an unexpected communication, an anonymous offer transmitted through a respected Boston attorney with no previous connection to the Mitchells. "My client wishes to resolve this situation amicably," the silver-haired lawyer explained in his wood-paneled office. $20 million in exchange for your Mitchell Technologies shares and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering all family and company matters. "Who's your client?" I asked. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information. It's my father using an intermediary to maintain deniability." The lawyer's slight eye twitch confirmed my guess. "The offer is quite generous," he continued smoothly. $20 million would secure your future while avoiding protracted legal battles that would damage everyone involved, including exposure of criminal fraud that would send family members to federal prison." His practiced, neutral expression slipped momentarily. "My client simply seeks a business resolution that serves all parties' interests." I leaned forward. "Tell my father his attempted character assassination campaign was a strategic error. Had he approached me differently, I might have considered a private resolution. Now, nothing short of full accountability will suffice." The bribe attempt confirmed we were making progress, but it also signaled the family's growing awareness of our activities. Catherine increased security measures using burner phones and encrypted communications. Marcus relocated our primary evidence to a secure location outside Boston. Then came the most unexpected development. James appeared at my temporary apartment one evening alone, and apparently unguarded. "5 minutes, Cass," he pleaded through the door. "No recordings, no witnesses, brother to sister." Against Catherine's standing advice, I let him in, though. I kept my phone recording in my pocket. James looked haggard, his usual polished appearance faded. "You need to stop this crusade," he began without preamble. "You have no idea the forces you're messing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Criminal fraud, tax evasion, and a family willing to destroy their own daughter to cover it up." James paced my small living room. "It's more complicated than that. These arrangements have existed for decades. Every major defense contractor operates similarly. The whole system is built on it. That doesn't make it legal or right. No, but it makes it dangerous to expose." He lowered his voice. "Dad isn't the only one with something to lose. There are people involved who don't play by gentlemanly rules, Cass. People who solve problems permanently." The implied threat hung in the air. "Are you threatening me, James?" "I'm warning you." For a moment, his arrogant facade cracked, showing what looked like genuine concern. "Take the 20 million. Disappear to some island. Live well and forget the Mitchell name. Why the sudden brotherly concern? You helped fabricate evidence against me." James looked away. "That was business. This is survival. Dad's desperate. I've never seen him like this. He's talking to people he shouldn't be talking to." "Then help me end this. Testify about what you know." He laughed bitterly. "And go to prison alongside Dad? I don't think so. You could negotiate immunity as a cooperating witness." Something flickered in his eyes, calculation possibility, before he shook his head. "It's too late for that. I'm too implicated." He moved toward the door. "This is your last chance, Cass. Take the money. Please." After he left, I played the recording for Catherine and Marcus. "He's scared," Catherine observed. "They all are." His warning about people who solve problems permanently feels like more than just dramatic language, Marcus noted with concern. "James always had a flair for theatrics," I said, "but added extra security measures anyway." Our moment of truth arrived 3 weeks later. We had compiled sufficient evidence to file formal whistleblower complaints with both the SEC and Department of Justice. Edward Parnell and 3 other former employees had signed sworn statements. Pentagon sources had verified contract discrepancies. The forensic financial trail, while incomplete, was compelling enough to trigger formal investigations. The night before filing, I received an unexpected text from Rebecca. Need to talk. Life or death, please. The common 7 a.m. by the duck pond. Catherine advised against meeting her. It's almost certainly a trap. Probably, I agreed. But what if it isn't? Rebecca's been in my father's orbit for months. She might have valuable information. At minimum, bring backup, Marcus insisted. The morning was crisp and clear, the Boston Common already filled with joggers and commuters. I spotted Rebecca on a bench by the pond, nervously scanning her surroundings. Catherine and Marcus positioned themselves on separate benches within sight. Rebecca looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and none of her usual polish. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat beside her, maintaining distance. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why am I here, Rebecca?" "To warn you. Uncle William knows about your whistleblower preparations. He has a plan to discredit everything before you can file. Something about planting evidence that you fabricated the documentation. Why are you telling me this? Last time we spoke, you helped steal my evidence." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't have a choice, Cass. He threatened to expose something. Something I did years ago. A mistake that would destroy my life if it became public. Blackmail. The Mitchell family specialty. I hate what I did to you." She wiped her eyes. "But I'm trying to make it right. I saved copies of everything before giving the originals to William. Everything they took from your apartment, plus additional documents I accessed from the family archive." She slid a thumb drive across the bench. "It's all here. Enough to prove everything you've been claiming." I stared at the small device, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Why should I believe this isn't another setup? Because I'm on their list now, too. William thinks I've become a liability. Her voice dropped to a whisper. After what happened to Henry Westfield, I realized no one is safe. My blood ran cold. "What about Henry?" "You haven't heard. He died 2 days ago. The official report says natural causes, but his nurse found signs of medication tampering. Nothing provable, just convenient timing." The news hit like a physical blow. Henry, our ally and my grandfather's oldest friend, was gone, just as our plan was coming to fruition, and under suspicious circumstances. I took the thumb drive, uncertain whether to trust it or Rebecca. "I'll have this checked for malware before accessing anything." Smart. She stood to leave. "One more thing. There's a safe deposit box at First Commonwealth Bank, box 1147. I put hard copies there as insurance. The key and access details are on the drive." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Cass, for everything." As she walked away, I wondered if this was another betrayal or genuine atonement. Either way, Henry's death had raised the stakes dramatically. What had begun as a fight for my inheritance and reputation had become potentially life-threatening. That evening, after verifying the thumb drive was clean, we discovered Rebecca had indeed provided a treasure trove of evidence, original documents, internal emails discussing the fraud schemes, and even recordings of family meetings about managing the offshore structures. More shocking was a folder labeled leverage evidence of my father's blackmail operations against his own family members, including the material he'd used to force Rebecca's cooperation. "This changes everything," Marcus said as we reviewed the files. "With this documentation, the case becomes nearly bulletproof." Catherine nodded grimly. "We need to move quickly. If Henry's death wasn't natural..." We agreed to file all complaints the next morning, earlier than originally planned. As I looked at our completed case file, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, determination, and grief for Henry, for the family I'd once believed in, and for the grandfather whose legacy had been so thoroughly corrupted. The Mitchell family had created this situation through decades of fraud, manipulation, and moral compromise. Tomorrow, they would finally face the consequences. We filed our whistleblower complaints with the SEC and Department of Justice at 8 a.m. sharp, delivering comprehensive documentation of Mitchell Technologies' systematic fraud. By noon, both agencies had acknowledged receipt and initiated preliminary reviews. By 3 p.m., Mitchell Technologies' stock had dropped 12% on unusually heavy trading volume as rumors circulated among financial insiders. Catherine had prepared a carefully strategized media approach, holding the full story for her own paper while providing key aspects to selected national outlets, ensuring the scandal couldn't be easily contained or buried. Dad called 17 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a single text message. Family meeting. Mitchell Estate. 7 p.m. tonight. Your last chance to address this privately before the full story breaks tomorrow. The response came minutes later. We'll be waiting. Marcus objected immediately. Going to their territory is extremely risky, especially now. They won't try anything with multiple witnesses present, Catherine countered. Plus, we've already filed the complaints. The investigation is happening regardless. I need to see his face, I explained. When he realizes it's really over. When he understands that all his threats and manipulations failed. We prepared meticulously. Physical copies of key evidence were delivered to Catherine's editor, with instructions to publish if we didn't check in hourly. Our full case file was securely backed up in multiple locations. Most importantly, Catherine arranged for 2 colleagues to accompany us as additional witnesses, waiting nearby in a separate vehicle. The Mitchell estate was fully illuminated when we arrived, security gates standing open in unusual welcome. The circular driveway contained only family vehicles, no signs of lawyers or outside advisors. William Mitchell himself opened the front door, perfectly composed in a tailored suit despite the circumstances. Cassandra. His voice betrayed no emotion. Miss Westfield. Mr. Garcia. Please come in. The formal living room had been arranged like a corporate meeting space. James sat stiffly on one sofa, Mother perched beside him looking ashen. Theodore Blackwell occupied an armchair, legal pad in hand. Rebecca stood by the windows, arms crossed protectively over her chest. No other family members were present, a surprisingly small gathering for what was positioned as a negotiation. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Dad began with bizarre cordiality, as if this were a normal business discussion. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that recent family interactions have been regrettably adversarial. That's an interesting way to describe character assassination and blackmail, Catherine remarked. Dad ignored her, focusing on me. Cassandra, while we may disagree about business practices, we're still family. There must be a path forward that preserves both the company's future and our relationships. The audacity was breathtaking. After months of systematic destruction of my life, he was attempting to appeal to family loyalty. Let me be clear about our position, I replied. Formal complaints have been filed with the SEC and Justice Department documenting decades of fraud. Multiple former employees have provided sworn testimony. Pentagon sources have verified contract discrepancies. And tomorrow, the Boston Investigative Journal publishes its investigation, followed by national outlets. Dad maintained his composure, but James paled visibly. Mother reached for her ever-present drink. Legal proceedings can take years, Theodore interjected smoothly. Companies often reach regulatory settlements without admitting wrongdoing. The Mitchell family has considerable political influence. This situation remains manageable. Marcus shook his head. Not this time. The evidence is too comprehensive, the pattern too established. This isn't one questionable transaction, it's systematic fraud spanning decades. Perhaps we should discuss specific terms, Dad suggested, ignoring Marcus. What exactly would it take to resolve this amicably, Cassandra? Complete corporate restructuring, I answered immediately. Your resignation. Full cooperation with authorities. Restitution of fraudulently obtained funds. No immunity requests for executives who knowingly participated. Dad's mask of reasonableness slipped slightly. That's not a negotiation. That's a surrender. It's accountability, I corrected. Something this family has evaded for too long. Mother suddenly spoke, her voice uncharacteristically clear. William, this has gone far enough. Tell her the truth. Dad shot her a warning look. Victoria now is not. No, she interrupted firmly. I've spent 30 years watching you manipulate everyone around you. I won't watch you destroy our daughter, too. The room fell silent as Mother set down her glass and straightened her shoulders. Richard never wanted any of this, she continued. He started cutting corners during the recession in the 70s to save the company, but he spent his later years trying to legitimate the business. William was the one who expanded the offshore operations, who created the billing fraud structure, who turned blackmail into corporate strategy. Dad's carefully maintained facade cracked. That's enough, Victoria. Is it? You've threatened our daughter, frozen her assets, destroyed her reputation. And for what? To protect your precious legacy of fraud. The dynamic had shifted unexpectedly, revealing family fault lines I hadn't anticipated. James looked increasingly panicked as Mother continued her uncharacteristic display of backbone. Cassandra James interrupted desperately. Surely there's a compromise, some arrangement that doesn't involve prison time and complete destruction of the company. You should have thought of that before fabricating evidence against me. I was following Dad's orders. I've always followed orders. James's voice rose hysterically. Do you have any idea what it's like being his son? Nothing is ever enough. Every achievement is just meeting basic expectations. James, control yourself, Dad snapped. Why should I? James stood abruptly. You promised this would be handled. You said your connections would protect us. Now we're facing federal charges because you couldn't control your daughter. The facade of family unity was disintegrating before my eyes. As James and Dad argued, Rebecca silently crossed the room to stand beside me. I have something else you should see, she whispered, sliding a folded paper into my hand. Evidence of wire transfers to political figures handling defense appropriations. Found it in William's private safe. Before I could respond, the situation escalated dramatically. Dad, losing patience with James's increasingly panicked accusations, grabbed his son's arm roughly. You're embarrassing yourself, he hissed. Pull yourself together or leave. Don't touch me. James shoved back forcefully, sending Dad stumbling backward into an antique sideboard. The crash of breaking crystal seemed to snap something in William Mitchell. His composed negotiator persona vanished, replaced by cold fury. You ungrateful children, he snarled, straightening his jacket. I built this empire while you enjoyed its benefits. Now you betray me because you lack the stomach for how real business operates. Real business doesn't involve fraud and blackmail, I countered. Doesn't it? Ask any major defense contractor. Ask any multinational bank. The entire system runs on strategic compromise and selective enforcement. Your grandfather understood that eventually. Richard regretted those compromises, Mother interjected. He told me so before he died. Dad laughed bitterly. Convenient timing for his moral awakening. After making his fortune, after ensuring his place in Boston society. This isn't helping William, Theodore warned, clearly concerned by the unraveling discussion. No, let's have truth for once. Dad continued, his control visibly slipping. Mitchell Technologies exists because Richard was willing to bribe the right officials in the 70s. It thrived because I was willing to expand those methods. James has benefited every bit as much as I have, despite his sudden attack of conscience." James flushed. "Don't drag me into your justifications. You've been signing off on the Singapore transactions for 5 years," Dad shot back. "Your name is on documents that would put you in prison alongside me." The meeting had transformed from negotiation to family implosion. Mother was now openly crying. James looked physically ill. Theodore was frantically taking notes, likely documenting statements he'd later argue were made under duress. Catherine caught my eye nodding slightly toward the door. We'd achieved more than expected, not a negotiated settlement, but something potentially more valuable: confessions and accusations that confirmed our evidence, all witnessed by multiple parties. As if recognizing the same thing, Dad suddenly lunged toward Marcus, who was closest to him. "Give me your phone, I know you're recording this." Security responded immediately to the commotion entering the room as Dad grabbed Marcus's jacket. Catherine's colleagues, alerted by the noise, also entered from where they'd been waiting. In that chaotic moment, Rebecca stepped forward, placing herself between Dad and Marcus. "Stop it, Uncle William. It's over." She pulled a small digital recorder from her pocket. "I've been recording everything since you blackmailed me. Everything." Dad's face contorted with rage. He reached for Rebecca, but security personnel intervened, restraining him as he shouted threats and accusations. Within minutes, the carefully orchestrated family meeting had descended into complete chaos. Mother retreated upstairs with her personal assistant. James left abruptly, ignoring his father's demands to stay. Theodore attempted to salvage the situation legally, but with too many witnesses to what had transpired, his options were limited. As we prepared to leave, Rebecca asked quietly if she could join us. "I can't stay here." "Not anymore." In the car, Catherine summarized what we'd witnessed. That wasn't just a negotiation failure. That was the complete collapse of the Mitchell family power structure. William lost control of the narrative of his family, of himself. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked, still clutching her recorder. "Now the legal process takes over," Marcus explained. "The agencies will investigate subpoena records, interview witnesses. Criminal charges will almost certainly follow for William, possibly James, and others involved. The company will face massive fines, shareholder lawsuits, and potential debarment from government contracting." I stared out the window as we drove away from the estate, feeling strangely empty. The confrontation I'd anticipated for months had delivered complete victory, yet brought no real satisfaction, only confirmation of how thoroughly corrupted my family had become. The next morning, federal agents arrived at Mitchell Technologies' headquarters with search warrants. Similar teams appeared at the family estate and multiple executive homes. The company stock plummeted further as Catherine's first article appeared detailing decades of systematic fraud. By afternoon, the U.S. Attorney's Office had announced a formal investigation into contract fraud and financial irregularities. Financial networks broadcast footage of William Mitchell being escorted from his office, stone-faced, refusing to answer questions. James was photographed leaving his Beacon Hill townhouse with packed suitcases, similarly silent. Mother called that evening sounding clearer and more present than I'd heard her in years. "I've filed for divorce," she said without preamble. "Should have done it 20 years ago." "Are you okay?" I asked, surprised by my continued concern for her despite everything. "No," she admitted. "But I might be someday. The investigators have offered me limited immunity in exchange for cooperation. I'm taking it." The Mitchell family empire was crumbling rapidly, each new revelation accelerating its collapse. Yet, amid the destruction, I found myself thinking about Grandpa Richard, how he'd started with good intentions, made moral compromises, he later regretted and ultimately tried to correct his legacy through me. I couldn't save the Mitchell name, but perhaps I could still honor what Grandpa had originally intended to build. 1 year after filing the whistleblower complaints, I called a different kind of family gathering. The setting was the community room of a downtown office building rather than the Mitchell estate, which had been sold to cover legal settlements. The attendees included remaining family members, key former employees, and selected members of the press. William Mitchell, recently sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice, was notably absent. James had reached a plea agreement involving cooperation, a shorter sentence, and significant financial penalties. Other executives had faced similar fates, their carefully constructed world of privilege and immunity shattered. Mitchell Technologies still existed, but in drastically altered form, restructured under new leadership and operating with government-mandated compliance oversight. The company's value had fallen by 60%, yet it survived, preserving thousands of jobs while implementing legitimate business practices. As the group settled into their seats, I stepped to the podium feeling the weight of the moment and my decision. Thank you for coming today. As you know, my grandfather's will left me $85 million in Mitchell Technologies stock. That inheritance sparked a chain of events none of us could have anticipated. Mother sat in the front row, 6 months sober and looking both older and more authentic without her society facade. Rebecca sat beside her, now working for Catherine's newspaper as a researcher. Various cousins, aunts, and uncles filled other seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to resentment. Today, I'm announcing my decision regarding that inheritance, which, despite the company's devaluation, still represents approximately $32 million. Murmurs rippled through the room. Many assumed I would keep the money, my justified reward after the ordeal. Some financial advisors had suggested leveraging my shares for control of the restructured company. I am donating $80 million, my inheritance, plus personal savings, to establish the Richard Mitchell Foundation for Corporate Integrity, dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, fraud investigation, and ethical business education. The murmuring grew louder. Mother nodded, slightly unsurprised. The remaining $5 million will fund a new ethical investment firm I'm launching with Marcus Garcia, focused on companies demonstrating exceptional corporate governance and transparency. I paused, looking directly at the family members present. Some of you may think this decision foolish. My father certainly does. When informed of my plans, he laughed and called me pathetically idealistic. His exact words were, "You're throwing away your birthright for a naive fantasy of corporate ethics." Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. After his mockery, I gave him this letter. I held up a sealed envelope. I'd like to share its contents with you today. The room fell silent as I unfolded several pages of heavy stationery. Dear Dad, I began reading. You raised me to believe the Mitchell name meant something. Excellence, integrity, vision. I spent my childhood striving to be worthy of that legacy, seeking your approval by embodying those values. What painful irony to discover that, while preaching those virtues publicly, you systematically violated them privately. The Mitchell legacy wasn't built on innovation and excellence as I believed, but on fraud, manipulation, and moral compromise. Grandpa Richard started with genuine innovation, but succumbed to the temptation of shortcuts during difficult times. He regretted those decisions and hoped I might eventually help redirect the company toward legitimate success. Instead, you expanded his mistakes into systematic criminality, justifying each step as necessary for the family's prosperity and position. The true cost wasn't measured in dollars, but in humanity. You sacrificed authentic relationships on the altar of wealth preservation. You taught James that moral flexibility was strength. You used Mother's social insecurities to ensure her complicity. You weaponized family loyalty to maintain silence. I wonder if you recognize what you've lost. Not just freedom or fortune, but the opportunity to be known and loved authentically. Behind the respect you commanded lay fear and resentment. Your legacy is a cautionary tale rather than an aspiration. Yet despite everything, I'm grateful. Your actions forced me to define my own values rather than inheriting yours. They connected me with people of genuine integrity, like Catherine, Marcus, and Henry. They revealed Rebecca's capacity for courage and Mother's potential for renewal. Most importantly, they clarified what true wealth means. Not numbers in offshore accounts or influence in closed boardrooms, but the freedom that comes from living with integrity. The peace of making decisions you needn't hide. The richness of relationships based on authentic connection rather than utility or obligation. I don't expect you to understand my decision to give away the inheritance. From your perspective, it probably seems like surrendering power for nothing. But I'm not surrendering power, I'm choosing a different kind. Not power over others through manipulation and fear, but the power that comes from aligning actions with values. The Mitchell name may never recover its former glory, but perhaps it can stand for something more meaningful than wealth and status. Perhaps through the Foundation's work it might eventually represent the integrity you claimed but never practiced. I hope someday you'll understand that in giving away the money, I've kept the only inheritance worth having the courage to stand for truth regardless of cost. That's the legacy I choose to carry forward with or without the Mitchell name. Your daughter Cassandra. As I finished reading, the room remained silent. Mother wiped tears from her eyes. Rebecca squeezed her hand supportively. Several relatives looked thoughtful, perhaps considering their own complicity or silence over the years. When my father read this letter, I continued his mockery stopped instantly. For perhaps the first time he saw me clearly, not as his idealistic daughter who didn't understand real business, but as someone who understood precisely what the family had become and chose a different path. Catherine stood to ask the first question. What do you hope the Foundation will accomplish? 3 primary goals: financial support for corporate whistleblowers facing retaliation, funding for investigative journalism, focusing on business ethics, and educational programs teaching ethical leadership in business schools. We want to change the narrative that corporate success requires moral compromise. Other questions followed about the Foundation's structure, my future plans, whether I maintained contact with my father, I didn't, and if I regretted my whistleblowing decision, I didn't. As the formal presentation concluded and people mingled with refreshments, Rebecca approached me. Your grandfather would be proud, she said quietly. This is what he hoped you'd do with his legacy, even if he couldn't articulate it. I think so too, I agreed. Though I doubt he anticipated the path we'd take getting here. Mother joined us looking more grounded than I'd ever seen her. I've been thinking about what you said in your letter about authentic relationships. She hesitated. I know I wasn't the mother you deserved. I chose security over honesty, comfort over courage. But I'd like the chance to build something real now if you're willing. The journey from that first family meeting where Dad had laughed at my naivety to this moment of potential reconciliation with Mother had been brutal, stripping away every illusion and security I'd relied on. Yet standing here with Rebecca, Catherine, Marcus, and yes, even Mother people connected by truth rather than convenient fabrications, I felt a peace that no amount of wealth could have provided. The Mitchell family, as I'd known it, was gone, its fortune diminished, its power broken. But from its ashes, something authentic was emerging, relationships based on who we truly were, rather than the roles we'd been assigned in the family mythology. As the event concluded, Catherine and I walked together to our next appointment, a meeting with prospective Foundation staff. Do you ever miss it, she asked. The life you had before. I considered the question carefully. I miss what I thought I had, the idealized family I believed in, but that was never real. What I have now is smaller but authentic. There's a freedom in that I wouldn't trade for any amount of inheritance. The foundation office buzzed with energy as we entered young idealists and experienced professionals united by commitment to corporate accountability. Marcus was already there presenting preliminary investment criteria for our new firm. Rebecca had arrived early organizing presentation materials for potential partners. This new community wouldn't replace the family I'd lost, but it offered something my inheritance never could have bought: the opportunity to build something aligned with my deepest values, surrounded by people who shared them, not because of family obligation, but because of genuine conviction. In giving up my $85 million inheritance, I'd found something far more valuable: my own voice, my own path, and the courage to stand by my principles regardless of cost. Some might call that foolish idealism. I called it the only inheritance worth having. What do you think about Cassandra's decision to give up her inheritance? Would you have done the same in her position? Or would you have kept the money despite its origins? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you believed was right? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone facing a similar dilemma. If you found value in this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories of courage and transformation, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes walking away from wealth can be the path to true freedom. Thank you for listening, and remember that your choices define your legacy far more than your inheritance ever could.